We talk everything real estate. Today, my guest is Joeseph Console of Console Matison, attorneys at law. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Hey, Pat, thanks for having me. Good to
Great,
be here.
great. Glad that you're here. Okay, so the first question I have is, what is your law practice? Like, where do you practice? What is the areas you cover?
We practice, all three of the attorneys in our office practice in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Or me specifically, I'm about 60% Philadelphia in terms of the clients that I take on and the work that I do, but the other 40% is spread pretty evenly between the counties in New Jersey and in PA on either side of the river.
Perfect. Okay. Now, law. Did you always know you wanted to be an attorney?
I did not. I never wanted to really do anything. I just kind of wanted to exist. I started off in a pre-med program in my college. I was in an accelerated pre-med program.
Okay.
That turned into I was like, well, then maybe I'll be a psychiatrist,
Right.
and then that turned into I'll be a psychologist. And then I just kind of kept dumbing it down until I got to a point where I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up doing an English major with a film studies minor at Temple University in their communications school. And I thought, I'll write movies, I'll be a movie reviewer. I just had, big dreams. I started writing screenplays, and I thought that there could have been something there. But the more that I looked into that, the more I realized you really have to stand out. Like,
Right.
we've got to be one in a million in that industry to be able to, have a good living and that sort of thing. And that wasn't for me. I took the entrance exam for the LSATs for law school, and
Right.
I scored in the top 1% of the country just somehow.
Right.
I guess what I'd been doing dovetailed really well into that work. So I went to law school, and the rest is history. And
Okay. Well, then the next question, why real estate law?
I clerked for a judge when I got out of law school. So I worked for a judge in Camden. Immediately after that, I got hired by a firm in New Jersey called Marazzo and Platt. The principals of that firm are solicitors in different townships in New Jersey, which means that they are the attorneys for different townships.
Okay.
So they oversee all the zoning board hearings. They review all of the plan submissions. And so I kind of started to learn about real estate and zoning
Right.
at that point. And I just saw it as a good place for me to use both like the book smarts, which I knew I had,
Right.
and the I saw zoning law, and we'll probably talk about that in a second. It's kind of quasi legal in the sense that you're putting a case on, but you're not fighting other lawyers and that sort of a thing,
Right.
to the same extent you are when you're in a courtroom in front of a judge. And that was a skill set that I have, which is being a people person versus I'm not really that bulldog in court person.
Right.
I'm more like a solutions person, and it just always seemed real estate law seemed like a good mix or merging of the different skill sets that I had, and I like helping people make money.
Right. It worked out. Perfect. Okay. So let's jump into zoning because that's one of the questions. And I also want to talk about the, Airbnb
Mhm.
rules in Philadelphia and all that kind of thing. So first of all, as far as zoning, I've seen clients, buy properties or try buying properties
Mhm.
where, they thought it was a legal three, unit property or a 5 unit and end up being something different. So just zoning overall, how does a person or a realtor navigate through knowing what a property is legal and what's not?
I would say that the first biggest tip is don't trust the MLS. What's listed on the MLS, if you read the MLS rules and regulations,
Right.
they specifically say on there, you can't believe any of this information except for the commission that's offered. So if agents offer a commission that through the MLS and to list it on there, that is legally binding.
Right.
Everything else on the MLS is not legally binding. So you pull down a bring down for a property, it says duplex. That doesn't really mean anything. It just means that at some point there was something on the public records that indicated it was a duplex, and that's what they pulled down. That said, the ways that you can figure it out, are we talking specifically Philadelphia?
Let's talk Philadelphia for right now. Yes.
Okay, so for Philadelphia, you could get a seller's certification report, which is something you can order for $50 from the city that will tell you what this property is zoned as in the eyes of the city. Now, it can be a little more nuanced than that because you might do a pull down and it could say this property was a legal duplex in 1999.
Right.
And it might be that by virtue of the property being rezoned as a single family and the owner's not ever pulling rental licenses, that even though at some point it was a legal duplex, it has since lost that right. So what you would do is talk to someone like me, and I would review the record for you. And there's plenty of people that can do that.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a lawyer, but an example of someone who knows how to review the record and say, yeah, it looks like it had that zoning, but they haven't pulled rental licenses in 25 years. So odds are this, and it's zoned to RSA 5, single family.
Right.
So odds are the city is not going to approve a use permit for two rental units.
Let me ask that question. So if you don't pull rental licenses, and you have a multifamily, what is that time frame? Does it automatically always revert back down to a single family? Somebody told me that, so I don't know how true that is, or
Well,
the time frame.
Are you assuming that its base zoning is single family?
Well, let's say it's in a regular single family, neighborhood.
Yeah, if the base zoning is single family, at one point it had a legal 3-unit license on it from a variance. If they didn't touch it for 3 years, the city is within their rights to consider that use abandoned, and it can revert back to the single family use.
Okay.
That doesn't always happen like that,
Right.
because there's scenarios where you can submit, and I'm kind of getting into the weeds, but continuous use affidavits where you can kind of prove to the city that it never actually was converted back to a single family, and there's no reason why they shouldn't allow you to continue that the 3-unit use
Right.
in your example.
Okay, and then we talked about Philadelphia. So is there differences in New Jersey with zoning?
Yeah, well, the licensure it's different from township to township in New Jersey. The concept of registering a use isn't exactly the same. There are plenty of variances in New Jersey for the same thing, but there's not rental licenses. So you might get that 2-unit variance, and as long as or 3-unit variance, and as long as you don't plow the building down, then that will run with the
Okay.
property forever, because you're not taking licenses out to prove that you're using it like that. As long as you register it once, start paying your annual, whatever the dues are
Right,
per
right.
unit, then it continues continues going as such with that occupancy.
Very good. Okay, great. So if there's like a moral to the story here, because a lot of realtors are listening to the show, what would be your best advice? One that I heard: don't trust the MLS.
Exactly.
But is there any other thing other than call Joseph?
Well, I like business, but I don't like it that much. So if you're a realtor and you're listening to this or watching this or whatever, definitely look at the rental licenses. If there's an active 3-unit rental license, then you can feel pretty good telling your client, I looked at it, I'm sending this to you. This looks like it's an active 3-unit
Right.
license. I believe you can trust it, but still talk to a lawyer if you
Right.
if you want some like definitiveness. But if you see in the record and the seller's attorney or the seller's agent is telling you this is a 3-unit property, you don't see a rental license, you don't see an active use permit that was pulled 2 months ago for 3 units, send it over to someone who knows about it, because it's the number of pieces of business I've gotten from realtors where it's 5 days before closing, and suddenly I'm holding someone's escrow deposit so I can get the zoning approved, because both of the agents thought that it was a legal 3-unit, and it wasn't. And it's nobody's fault, except it's both of their faults.
Right.
But because it's a somewhat blameless situation, we just worked through it. But they could have called me as soon as it went under
Right.
contract during the
Just to make sure.
Yeah, just to do during the due diligence period. So if you're not sure, ask a lawyer. And like as a lawyer, like I was a broker for Keller Williams on Broad Street, South Philly, for the calendar year 2019. I'm always happy to talk to real estate agents. You can call me. I'll talk to you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I'm not going to charge you. I'm not going to have any kind of
Right.
feeling about it. I like to do that because if I can help educate people, like I know that will eventually lead to people calling me
Correct. Right.
as someone who can help them, and I don't mind helping.
Right.
So
Okay, great. So let's sort of change subjects a little bit. That was some good information about
Okay.
zoning. Airbnbs. What is the story with Airbnbs? I know there were some rules passed several years ago with city council. Can you elaborate about that?
Yeah, so it's kind of weird that my firm has become a little bit of an expert on the Airbnb permitting. How it happened, just briefly, was in 2020, we purchased the company PhiladelphiaZoning.com, which was just an expediting service.
Right.
but they had done some Airbnb licensing when it was the Wild West in Philly. And so there was some blogs on our website. We bought it mainly for the zoning intakes and the rental license work, and it's worked out really well.
Right.
But during that time, during COVID, the city council was able to push through some measures that are less draconian than some places like New York City, but still pretty draconian in the sense that they cut down the ability for property owners to get legally licensed as Airbnbs. And we could talk about the two categories of legality now, but for a while, you could get some of the licensure without having to even apply to the city. They would just give you 90 days unlimited through the year
Okay.
with an application that anyone could fill out. They would give you half the year. And then the whole year was never legal to do, except in certain parts of the city.
Right.
But what was the original question?
Well, no,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's go into the next. Now, city council passed new, rulings, laws, about Airbnbs, and they just recently started enforcing it. Correct?
Yeah, right.
Is that the deal?
Yeah, so we had these blogs up on this new company's page, and we started getting they started passing these laws, we would get all these intakes about Airbnb. So my partner and I were like, let's learn all about it.
Right.
So they passed these new rules, and again, I spaced on the question.
Well, now that they're enforcing it, because
Yeah.
before
Right.
it was passed a couple of years ago,
They
right?
passed it in 2021
Right.
through a measure put in by David O.
Right.
And they kept saying, all right, it's going to be in January that we're going to enforce it. It's going to be July. It's going to be January. And then finally, right before this summer, they said, all right, we're serious. And in tranches, we are going to take down every illegally licensed Airbnb. So they sent out all these notices, and people still thought, it's not me.
Right.
It never happened to me. It's Philly. The bureaucracy stinks, but it benefits me in the sense that no one ever gets around to
Doing it, right.
to doing it. And then they did it. A lot of that's economic because these full-time Airbnbs have decimated the hotel industry in a lot of
Right.
ways. And so I think the city, and I think globally, it's wise to rethink who gets to be a full-time hotel. And so I'm not totally against what was going on in theory by the city, but
Right.
they are enforcing it now and pulling down listings.
Okay, and then now my understanding they're going after the actual Airbnb platform. Is that what they're doing, or are they going after individuals? Or are they saying to the platform, saying, "Hey, unless they have a license, we're going to go after you"?
Right. So they said that to the platform, and the platform fought it for so long, but eventually it got to the point where they said, all right, here's what we're willing to do, Philadelphia, New York, Jersey Shore. We will enforce, you tell us what's required, and we will make that a required piece of information that we need to
Have.
have.
Right.
And so the public-private partnership between the two has resulted in listings being taken down, and
Yeah, I mean, and you would think it's smart. Instead of going after the 6,000, the 9,000, the 10,000 people individually, you go to the platform, boom, you just, wipe away all these people by threatening to fine them.
Well, right, or do what New York did, which is make the rules so tight. I mean, New York, I don't know if you've read about what they're doing now, but it's to the point where you have to be physically present in your house if you're going to rent it out as an Airbnb. So you can be in one bedroom and the guests can be in another.
Right.
Like was originally was the idea that Airbnb had. So they said,
Right.
all right, well, you can still do that, but you can't be a hotel
Right.
because we have enough hotels.
Okay, so now there's two kinds of licenses, right?
Mhm.
So there's one like you just mentioned. Hey, I live in a house, I can rent out another room,
Mhm.
and then there's another license straight out that hey, I'm renting out my house. I don't live there, that kind of thing. Is that correct?
So there's two licenses. There's the limited lodging license. The limited lodging license allows a full-time occupant of a property, either a tenant with a permissive lease, meaning a lease that allows you to sublease, or a owner occupant that owns the property and lives in the property, and you have to prove that you live in the property one way or
Right.
the other, and it allows you to rent your property for up to 180 days per year on a short-term rental platform such as Airbnb, or
Okay.
almost specifically always Airbnb.
Okay, and now how difficult is it to get that license?
That is a by right license.
Okay.
If you are if you have a driver's license that says that you live at 100 Spring Garden, wherever we are right
Right,
now,
right, right.
and that's the property that you want for 180 days, the city has to give it to you.
Okay.
There's hoops you have to jump through. You got to get inspected for lead, a few other things, but it's a by right license.
And then how long does that license take to get?
Uh,
Is it an
we
over a counter type of thing?
it's we process it through Eclipse, and if you've got all your ducks in a row, you have to first apply for the zoning permit. So this, at the zoning use permit level, they review all your stuff and just say that you qualify. And then
Right.
once you have the qualifying use permit, you can send it over to licensing themselves, and then licensing will send you a bill to open your limited lodging account with licensing, pay the initial fee, and then you're off to the races. So it could be 3 weeks. It could be 5 weeks
Okay.
if all your ducks are in
And
a row.
and then how much is that? How much is the bill? How much is the license?
I believe it's $180 or something
Okay.
like that.
And
Plus
then
your use permit's like 25. So it's
okay, so it's not that much.
yeah,
Okay, and then
you're paying it annually too.
right, right, right. And then you have to do the lead-based paint.
Mhm.
I believe that's what, once every 3 years or something like that?
Yeah, I believe that's where they're at right
Something
now.
like that.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so that seems pretty straightforward and easily done because it's by right. Okay, so now more of the hotel license. How difficult is that? Because if I'm in Fishtown, let's say, or in Fairmount, or
Mhm.
wherever, South Philly, it doesn't matter where you're at, it's a residential neighborhood. You're not going
Mhm.
to be in like a hotel zone like you're in Center City, so that's going to be more difficult, right?
Yeah, so when they started tightening the rules and coming up with the plan, the city, I mean, they shoehorned Airbnb into the visitors accommodations permit, which is a license that hotels hold in order to have, well, there's a hotel license too, but
Right.
in order to have full-time renter only on a nightly basis, 365
Right.
days a year. That's called a visitor accommodations permit. That is only allowed by right in certain areas of the city. And I wrote down the ones
Right.
because I always tell people certain ones when they ask me, because this is a question I get a lot, but
Right.
I was curious, like, what else is there? So, like, the big ones are that you'll come across CMX3, CMX4, CMX5, IRMX. Those are zoning designations in the city that people actually buy properties in. The other ones, RMX2, which I've never seen, RMX3, CA2, and a bunch of special purpose
Right.
zones also approved by right visitor accommodations. Everything else, which includes single family, which includes residential multifamily RM1, regular CMX2, the three most popular CMX1s, the most popular zoning designations do not allow it by right. And
Okay.
that I would like to know what the percentage of the, but I bet you it's probably 90% of the properties in the city don't qualify by right. Maybe even more than that.
Okay.
For-
And then how long does it take? Because in Inquirer had articles. I mean, it's been all over the place that it's taken 6 months plus just to apply for those license just because zoning is so backed up.
Yeah, I think that's right. Zoning is I'm not sure if you want to call it backed up. During the pandemic, they shifted to an online model, and it's worked out really well in a lot of ways. But it's really efficient now, but the timeline is not fast. So you apply for your visitor accommodations permit. They have 30 days to review it. They will refuse it unless you're in one of the zones that I mentioned,
Right.
and then you appeal it just like any other zoning variance, and then you get scheduled 4.5 to 5.5 months later in front of the zoning board.
Right.
And you have to jump through all the same hoops as if you're going for any other zoning variance.
Right.
So yeah, I guess backed up is a good term. But
Or it just takes time. Period. It
right,
doesn't.
it takes time. It only stretched out, in 15 years, it's maybe a month and a half longer, 2 months longer than it was when I first took my first zoning case in Philly.
Right.
So which is I guess 50% longer. So that does feel longer, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's tough for an individual because especially if you're an investor and you're buying a property and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to Airbnb this out, you have no clue you're going to get the approval on it.
You have no clue.
Right. So, the year lease, better work out.
Yeah. Right.
When you're doing your numbers,
Mhm.
Yeah.
These, especially like these visitor accommodations permits, because it's so new, lawyers, I think, at least based on what I know, who I've talked to and the observations I've made at the zoning board, are hesitant to take a lot of these ones that seem difficult in front of the zoning board. But I've seen plenty of these get passed, and we've had plenty of them get passed, but
Right.
it's more of a case by case basis Not that the zoning board is just going to grant it to anyone who asks, because
Okay.
that's not the case.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so last question, and then I'll ask for contact information if people want to know more about, zoning and obviously the Airbnb stuff that we just spoke about.
Cool.
What other areas of law do you cover? Because all we did really talk about is zoning.
Yeah.
So do you do probate? Like, what other stuff do you do?
Yeah, so I do transactional real estate. I do other kind of fix-it real estate for like a good example is a quiet title complaint.
Okay.
Those are work. I have a title companies when they come across deeds with an old mortgage on it, they'll send me that client and they'll have money escrowed because it could be a $20,000 mortgage from 1970.
Right.
The lender back in the 70s, you could just lend money to people, just go to door and write them a check for 15 grand and get a mortgage on their house. That's illegal, but those mortgages still exist. So they'll pay us to clear those up. That's something that we do. We have a probate team that we can handle probates to help deal with sticky situations where you find a relative that owns a property of someone who's been deceased forever, and then we untangle that and get it to a position where they can sell that lot to you or sell that house to you.
Right.
And that's a big piece of our practice too. And then, like I said, general transactional real estate, commercial leasing work, something I like to do. Yeah, I would say
Perfect.
that's it. My partner Scott's a family law attorney. He's amazing.
Okay.
And then we have Kyle works for our firm too, and he's a new attorney and just working with us on different cases and things like that.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, and we'll post all the numbers for, as well, but how would they get a hold of you if they want to find out more?
They could email me, Joe at Console Legal, ConsoleLegal.com. Call me, 267-603-2493, extension 1. That's the two best ways to get a hold of me. I'm very available by phone or email, and I pride myself on that. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for being on the show. Learn some good information because you read about the different things that are going on with these Airbnbs and just zoning in general, and you can't make heads or tails of it, or at least I can't. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Well, I like that it's confusing because that's how I get leads.
Right.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so cool. It's my first video podcast. I hope
Great.
It went well.
We'll do more. We'll do more.
I would love to.
Okay, so that's the Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez. Be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe below. I have some great guests lined up, some really good topics. Also, leave a comment. Tell me some things that you like, you don't like, or some topics you want me to cover in the future. Remember, this show is everything real estate, no limits. Hope you enjoyed the show. And